Count up or count down. Just pick one. You can't keep going back and forth. I get the count up and then I start and she's like, I'm not going yet. Get the count up and then I get the count down. Welcome to a very chaotic Tuesday on Atomic Mass Transmissions Live. I'm Director of Product Development Will Schick, and today we're going to be painting the Mandalorian and Grogu from the Certified Guild Star Wars Shatterpoint Squad Pack. This is my first time actually putting paint on these characters on stream, so we're just going to mess around and have fun. If there's things that, we want to try with these fine spacefaring gentlemen, we can do that. But otherwise, we'll probably just do a pretty normal approach today. I don't have a wet palette, so we're just going to wing it with the old school well palette and see how that goes for us. I'm going to guess it'll be fine. It'll be fine, Ann. It's going to be fine. Affirm my optimism.
I affirm you.
It doesn't feel real, just to be clear. It doesn't feel genuine. I have no access to chat either, so just so you know. If you want me to respond to anything, I will not because I can't see it. All right, so we're just going to knock out the undersuit. So we're just going to quickly put on a little bit of, this is going to be, what did I pick here? Brown umber? Dark umber. Dark umber. Oh, messed that up. Let's erase you really quick. There we go. Just as a quick little wash for the undercoat, for the undersuit, I guess, as it were. And I'm roughly using a reference guide here, but I'll be honest, the costume has some pretty subtle and not so subtle changes between the different seasons, so I'm not going to sweat it too much here as I move along, because we just want to get this guy tabletop ready so we can throw him on a battlefield and start collecting bounties. Start with our "this is the way" talk. And so with that in mind, I'm not going to worry too much about the stuff that, the eye can't see as easily. You might even notice that I missed a couple of mold lines on this fella because I didn't, spend ages cleaning him up. I just kind of got him to a point that I was happy with and then decided to prep him for today's stream. And all of that stuff's okay, because again, remember, I'm not painting for competition, I'm painting for enjoyment, and to just get some cool minis on the tabletop to have some fun games with. And therefore, whatever you're feeling like, I guess now I realize that the little pad shouldn't be brown, but we'll fix that later. But whatever destiny you want for your miniatures, that's what you should be doing. So don't feel pressured to have to, match somebody else or hit things to a certain standard. It's better to just let yourself have the freedom and the flexibility to do whatever is fun and enjoyable for you and enjoy your art the way you want to enjoy it. Come on, Pain Gray. This is the point in the show where it shoots out and I get way too much. And then we're very sad.
Folks are asking if there were other poses.
Were there other poses? Honestly, not really. We talked a little bit about some options for the character, but as kind of a little bit of a proof in concept, but also because we wanted to really focus on how to get the pram with little baby Grogu, or baby Yoda as he was way back at the time known. To all of us watching the show and everything, we we had limited options because, you know, a lot of it came down to, okay, we have to make sure the pram feels natural and like it's, you know, truly floating. We don't want to use any kind of flight stand or terrain to hold it up because that won't feel quite as accurate. And so that kind of dialed in a lot of our opportunity and options for different posing because there were only so many places where we knew we could connect him. And the one that we identified the fastest was obviously going to be the cape. And so with that in mind, then the whole kind of conversation became, okay, how do we, knowing that we're going to use the cape as the anchor point for the pram, and that's what's going to give us this illusion of flight for our little baby Yoda, what can we do with that that's going to feel interesting and exciting and unique? And honestly, this time, you know, I'm sure many people have kind of recognized what we did from all of the really cool promotional posters and stuff from episode 1. So, or season 1, not episode 1. Episode 1 too, but season 1 of The Mandalorian, that's where really all, you know, this, you've seen this look or something very close to it on pretty much all of those season 1 posters. With him kind of striding confidently forward. Sometimes he has the blaster pistol in his hand, sometimes he doesn't. We opted to go with no blaster pistol because we wanted this aura of confidence and swagger. We really wanted to get some Mandalorian swagger in there. And so by leaving him kind of like ready to draw instead of having drawn or anything like that, it gives him more of this badass, I'm not worried about the situation, I can take you down without having to come in, you know, guns loaded for bear and all of that stuff. So there wasn't a ton of exploration because, again, you know, the reality is really, it's all about this. And yes, any paint explosion that we deal with while on stream is automatically Pagani's fault. That is correct. It's been that way since day one. If you joined us for some of the initial streams way back in 2019, you will know that Pagani is always the cause of every paint explosion and forevermore will be. So I'll never forget it. Him just exploding an entirely new dropper bottle of paint all over the place as we're just trying to hang out and do our thing and talk to people. What a time to be alive it was. So we're just gonna kind of mix up our next brown wash and start putting that around the belts and everything. And again, tabletop quality and all of that other kind of considerations, we're just going to like sketch in our colors and get everything kind of lined up. And then we'll decide, once we kind of have everything in place, where we want to spend the rest of our effort that we have available in order to make everything look nice. I do have to look at the Mando's boots. What color are his boots? Quick Ann. Mando's boots. Color. Go. Too slow. Too slow. They're just the classic old black boots, it looks like. Little old black boots. Oh, sometimes they're brown. It really seems like no one quite knows. No one quite knows. So we'll just play it by ear. We don't have to match perfectly. Again, this is just costume options and changes. That works perfectly well for me.
Interesting.
Yeah, you noticing that his boots change color all the time?
Yeah.
Because a man doesn't have one pair of boots, and he has many pairs of boots. Because he must walk down so many roads to be a man.
There also tends to be kind of like a costume designy code. There isn't an actual one, right? But when you're looking through costumes on screen for these films, that unless you are truly an Imperial, you don't wear like black.
Not true black, because I mean, you know, again, that goes back to that whole like white hat, black hat, cowboy idea. where your clothing very much distinguishes your character to some extent.
But it also like in certain lighting, the very like dark brown can look kind of black.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then his costume changes a little bit from when he gets his new armor too.
Well, and even that changes season to season as well.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that we also had to kind of dial into as we were working on this character, making sure that, you know, we did the full Beskar armor version. So there was that part, but then we also did the badge that he gets at the end of season 1. So this is really last couple of episodes Mando armor style, which is different from where we see him in season 2, where he's done some adjustments and made a couple of alterations to his kit. So it's very interesting kind of to try to track the evolution of the costume and the outfit and what little nuances change as they come back. And this happens between, you know, even in the movies. And it's one of the biggest challenges that we have at the studio when looking at these characters, and one of the things that Dallas and, you know, the artist and the engineers and the sculptors and everything, Mike Jones, our sculpting senior sculpting manager and all that, like they really have to pay attention and be careful about the reference that they're pulling from, because the reference can dramatically shift, not in big ways, but in kind of small ways that make some pretty big differences. And if you're trying to place the characters in a specific time frame or a very specific area, if you're not careful about that, you can make a huge mess like I just did because my paint wasn't dry, but that's okay. We'll fix it right now. There. Beautiful. So that becomes another one of the balancing acts that we always have to play with and we have to look at and be very careful of as we go through and do this stuff. All right, so we're just going to go in and we're going to do some true metallosity. So we'll start with our dark silver. And just use that to start base coating everything. Oh, we got a professional casual in here. How exciting. We're on the way, folks.
Now, did you always think you were going to float Grogu like that, or?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, like when we were talking about doing the character, it was pretty much universally accepted or acknowledged that there was no way to do Mando without baby Grogu, right? You can't do Mando without the child. It's so iconic, especially at the time of that show coming out in season 1 and all the stuff, the era in which we were kind of working on this character and looking at everything from LFL and that kind of stuff. We did briefly, and I mean very briefly, we discussed maybe doing something where like, you know, Grogu was on the ground and he was like doing the pick me up kind of pose, right? So you have Mando and Grogu's like, pick me up, pick me up. We didn't love that though, because you would have to lose something from either Grogu, because you wouldn't see his face very well. He'd have to be turned towards the Mandalorian. We talked briefly about having the Mandalorian hold Grogu, but you know, ultimately that has a lot of limitations in what kind of action and what kind of story is being told there as well. So we talked, you know, again, we talked around some options and ideas, but end of the day, we kept coming back to the fact that where we really wanted to go with this character and the feeling we wanted to evoke, you know, we wanted the miniature to look like he was walking off that season 1 poster, and that was really the look that we kept coming back to. The funny thing is sometimes you look at something and it's, you know, it's very inspired by, or even in some ways a a one-to-one of something else that exists, whether it's a movie poster or, you know, a scene, a freeze frame still from a movie or a panel from comics or whatever. And, you know, in your head, you're like, yes, that's exactly what we want. That works perfectly for what we're trying to accomplish. It's greatly indicative of the character. We love it. This is what we want. And then you spend the next like week trying to do exactly that, but in a different way, because you don't want to just completely lift it. You're like, but we have to make it, but we can't do that because, you know, somebody already did that or people have already seen it. And almost every single time that happens, you always wind up coming back to the reason that it hit you as perfect in the first place is because it was. And you should really just go with that because, you know, when you're doing miniatures, you're trying to capture so much in a very static statue, right? Like just a stationary sculpt, and it has to convey so much. It has to convey tone and story and character and emotion. And there's only so many things that a human body can do. I believe Dallas Kemp always screams that there's only 7 things that a human body can actually do, right? There's 7 poses of the human body. There are variations on those poses, but there's really only 7 things. So there's a limited, you know, it's a finite box. You can't do everything and anything. And eventually you kind of hit this point where it's like, okay, well, if it is perfect and it says it's perfect and everyone thinks that it's perfect, that's what you should do. It doesn't matter that people might have seen it before, because ultimately, as you get into sculpting, you get into the engineering, all of that stuff, each medium is going to require very different, you know, it's going to require different tweaks. It's going to require different changes. So while you may start, you know, we may start with an iconic image from one of the Disney Plus show's posters, promotional images, right? Where we wound up is that there's a lot of subtle differences and tweaks that we did in order to make that image read super well as a miniature. And that's where you find some of your uniqueness, right? It's like same idea behind, you know, Dallas, Ann, and I can all paint the exact same miniature using the exact same colors, following kind of the exact same pattern, right? Put these colors here, right? A little paint by numbers. Follow this reference and paint this character like this. And we'll come up with 3 entirely unique paint jobs, right? We'll have 3 entirely different looking finished products because each of us, due to our talents and the way in which we perceive colors and the way in which we approach our art and all of that, will end up doing things differently, and that will lead to a different final result. And all 3 of those results will be just as good, you know, but they'll just be reflective of the person. And that's kind of art in general. But I think a lot of times we get a little afraid of that, or we lose sight of the fact that, you know, replication in a creative environment or a creative subject, it's not tracing, right? It's not photocopying. It's simply following a kind of a set bath. Yeah, a set bath. You know where my mind is. I'm ready for my bubble bath. I'm ready to just go soak and sink down into the suds. But a set path, you know, a little bit of a directional map. And we'll all get to the same destination, but the journey that we take to get there will be very different. And that's, you know, one of the joys of art, one of the joys of creativity, and one of the joys of the games that we get to play. That it's, you know, that philosophy, it aligns with not just the hobby aspect of these miniatures games, painting them and all of that stuff, but it also comes down to playing them, right? How many times do we see players like talk about lists online, or you talk about meta lists, or even just, well, I really like these characters and this is how I play them. And then somebody else comes in and says, I don't play them like that at all, but I love all those same characters. This is what I do. And suddenly, you know, people are having a discussion about, well, which way makes more sense? Which way is better? You know, what gets you the better result? Well, the question partially is like, what kind of result are you looking for? You know, what's your end goal with what you're doing? And that's also what's fun about, you know, interacting with these communities and the games around them that we do and all of that stuff, is that there isn't a one-to-one perfect answer for any of it, because we all get to inject ourselves and our creativity and, the uniqueness of our situation as well into it. And because of that, we might all be going in the same direction, but wind up in very different places. And we get to celebrate that uniqueness and that creativity and all of that stuff together on the tabletop, in play, at things like the Worthy, painting competitions, in our stores, in our metas, on social media, all that stuff. But yeah, so in the end, right, like coming back to full circle to what we were talking about with the posing and the identity and sculpt and positioning for this miniature, we did do some exploration. But looking back on it, there was really only ever one outcome, and it was this. We just kind of all knew that this is exactly what we wanted, that this was going to speak to the best to what we had in our minds and what we were trying to do with this miniature and everything, and especially as one of the kind of proof of concept pieces for Shatterpoint in general, and what the scale would look like, what the stylization and the design would look like, and things like that. So it was this Mandalorian here, this Mando. See, it's pretty good, right? That's as far as I can get, though. But I want a quick cut of all the Mandos ever said. So we did the Mando here, and then we also did Anakin Skywalker. A version of that proof of concept sculpt did wind up actually in the core set. So the Anakin that you all have if you play Shatterpoint, or picked up the core set, even if you play Shatterpoint and didn't, well, you should think about it. Because, there's some great characters in that core set that you're missing out on. And one of them is Anakin Skywalker, and he was also one of the proof of concept characters that we did. And that one was a bit different because, well, with the Mandalorian, right, we were saying, okay, how do we take these Star Wars elements and the look and everything, and what's going to be our scale, and what's kind of going to be our, our overall, like, stylization and proportions and all of that. We didn't have to worry about a likeness, right, because he's got his helmet on. So it's all very much like this. And then Grogu was its own unique challenge, as Grogu always is. But with Anakin, it was then very much, okay, well, how does Anakin Skywalker look in Shatterpoint, right? How do the faces, the likenesses that we know that aren't just a Mandalorian helmet, how are they going to come across? How are they going to be presented in this game and in this kind of style? And so because Anakin has existed in both the movie world and the animation world, he was a great first place to start because we could kind of draw from either spot, and we could take inspiration from both. So we could say, all right, well, we know we want more of an animated look. Here's how Lucasfilm itself dealt with Anakin's stylization in the Clone Wars. We liked this, we don't like that. We'd do this a little differently. And from there, we were able to really dial in, okay, this is the style with Lucasfilm and everything. This is the style that we're thinking of. This is how we're going to treat all of these different folks. Here's how it kind of corresponds to how they've been portrayed in other media, whether that's, the live action or the animated. And then we're going to apply this to other stuff, right? And we're just going to move forward with this once we had kind of reached an accord that said, okay, we're all pretty happy with where we are here. So we feel like this is a good direction and that it's really evoking what we want, and it feels like Star Wars, but it's also a little bit of a unique Star Wars sensibility, and it has all of those great little bits and bobs that we were hoping to achieve out of it. And then we moved on to the other characters in the core set and a bunch of other characters, and then eventually we got to the original trilogy characters, and those ones were extra interesting and exciting because there was no real solid animated reference for them, so they had never been done in anything but live action. And if you really look hard at those characters or do like a good comparison, you'll see that for the most part, anything from the original trilogy stuff has a bit more realism to it because there's not a lot of reference or tradition for how those characters would get stylized, right? There's some comics and things like that. Marvel and other comic book publishers have done amazing Star Wars stories in the past, and they've put that comic book, obviously non-realistic spin on Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and Princess Leia and things like that. But those things they vary greatly from creative team to creative team, from publisher to publisher. So they're a guide, but they're not necessarily an LFL approved style. And in the end, right, that kind of led us to come back with LFL to determine that, okay, we're going to be a little less stylized on these people because their likenesses really matter heavily. They haven't changed at all, throughout the entire course of Star Wars. Mark Hamill's face, Harrison Ford's, Carrie Fisher's, those likenesses are those characters, and we really needed to make sure, we felt in discussions with LFL and everything else, that those faces need to be recognizable, even if we were going to stylize them a little bit. And that leads to, these different levels of stylization across the different lines. So if a character has a strong animated reference, you'll see probably that character will be treated a little bit more in an animated style than, say, a character like a Luke Skywalker or a Princess Leia that's never been in animation before. And I know that there's those characters did wind up in the short animation like films, which names I can never remember, but I can always see them in my head. So they have been, they have been drawn, they have been stylized in likeness, but nothing quite like the canon officialness of something like the Clone Wars animated series, right? Where we really lived and breathed those characters in that style as they were developed for 7 seasons of existence. And now, Anakin Skywalker from the Clone Wars series is almost as much, if not more, Anakin Skywalker than, say, a Hayden Christensen or things like that, especially depending on where you started in Star Wars and, where your enjoyment of the franchise and those stories lie. But there are 2 very distinct and unique kind of Anakins that you can choose from. I see somebody's already explaining exactly what I'm working on here, so... Did Mando have any rules he didn't end up with? Yeah, he had quite a few. He had quite a few rules that went through various changes and iterations and stuff. His identity shifted quite a bit from where it started as we kind of honed in on what it meant for him to be a scoundrel and a bounty hunter and how he would interact with Grief and IG-11. So there were definitely changes and shifts. I don't think there was anything that was like nutty. A lot of it had to do with his tags and how he interacted with things. The representation of his Amban sniper rifle did go through a couple of different spots. He had a rule similar to Crosshairs originally, where he could like snipe you out of cover and do a little shove and stuff. That didn't last very long because it wasn't really doing what we had hoped it would do. And so we shifted gears on that, kind of moved away from it. This is the way identity went through a couple different adjustments where I think it went from a momentum gaining kind of bounty system to something else, and then the bounty idea got moved to Grief, Karga. So there were definitely a number of different like alterations and changes. There was nothing. Whoa, that's interesting. And by interesting, I mean messy. Where'd my thing go? There it is. But there was nothing like that I would say was an identity of Mando that got put on the cutting room floor and didn't make it through. for the most part, everything we started with from a general concept did wind up getting in there. It's just how that was implemented, you know, got a little shifted here and there. Yeah, if you're looking for like good holders, right, you can use obviously the tops of rattle cans like we're using here. It'll actually work in your hand really well. Pringles cans, you can actually use an empty paint pot. So if you find a paint pot's really nice to hold right in your hand, you can just do that and then stick one on the bottom here using blue tack or double-sided mounting tape. Bigger bottles, so kind of like this medium bottle. I really like these. These are about the right size for my hand. I find this to be a little too much when I'm painting long term, but it works well for the stand here. But something like this, where it really kind of fits perfectly in the palm, you know, these, you just buy some really cheap craft paint, dump out the paint, and just use the bottle as a handle if you want to in a pinch. All those things are options. Wooden dowels are really good. Yeah, and as far as the mic stand setup, I mean, you can use it, but we always talk about how it's really frustrating to paint with this because we can't get to the undersides at all, really, because you really want to be able to, you know, you want to be able to spin the Mini around and turn it and look at it from different angles and get to the undersides and stuff like that. And this just doesn't allow for it, but it does keep us on frame for the most part and keep us in focus 90% of the time. And so since we're just kind of like painting here to hang out and chill, and we're not trying to win any kind of crazy competitions or anything like that, it's a really good option for us on air for just kind of how our setup is. Just gonna mix in kind of a little bit of a mid-tone silver here for our armor. Boop. And we'll do the fun part, which is just kind of like building up the shiny silver of all of his Beskar armor. And so this is very much just kind of like a classic, you know, shadow highlight, edge highlight kind of technique. I didn't do any wash because I started with a really dark silver, but you could easily go in and do like a really deep blue wash if you wanted to get some cool synthwave colors into your armor. You could do a magenta and then go into your highlights and stuff like that. Maybe we'll play with that a little bit. Who knows? See how much time we have and where we're at. But you want to keep most of your darkness, right? It's that classic Bob Ross kind of style. The shadows are what give your life light. Darkness is what gives you all your contrast. So can't have light without dark. Don't let the light overwhelm the dark, or otherwise you're not going to be able to see anything. You know, you're not going to know bright exists if there's never any shadow. And so it's really important to be very, you know, methodical and thoughtful with your highlights. It can feel really good to see things get brighter and brighter and to see those details get picked out and really start to shine. But if you do too much of that, if you go too far and you lose all that darkness, the shine is suddenly going to disappear on you, because without shadow, there's no light, there's no bright. for example, if we want something to really stand out, like say this little clan symbol here, we can just really dial that in with some bright, make that work. But less is typically more when you're talking about stuff like this, right? So metal's a really interesting material because we think of it as so shiny, but the reality is that, you know, it's only reflective on the spots where it really hits the light, where the light bounces directly off it. Otherwise, you know, it's reflective of whatever the environment is. So a lot of folks will say, you kind of take, even when you're not doing true metallics, or when you're doing like non-metallic metals, right? You can use some of those concepts when you're painting with true metallics. So you can wash, for example, down from belt down, use brown colors to shade, right? Because that'll feel like the metal's reflecting the earth, the ground. So you can use browns for that. You can use kind of earthy colors, and then once you do belt above, you can use blues and use a bit more blue in your washes and your glazes and stuff, and that'll feel like it's reflecting the sky, right? Because the sky is up and the ground is down. And now that you know that, all of your life problems will be solved, because, you know, that's the biggest bit of wisdom I have for you all. Sky up, ground down. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. But yeah, so if you just simply think about it in terms of, you know, from here above, use blues. From here down, use browns. You'll get more of that natural feeling, reflective color of how the armor functions and how real metals work. And then the other part is to just remember that most of a metal surface is going to be dark. You know, it's not going to be reflective. So you really want to be careful about where you're putting those highlights. And you want to keep the overall effect pretty dark. And even with just a little bit of light, you know, less light than you feel comfortable with potentially, your eye is going to read it as metallic. It's going to read it as really shiny. Because really reflective surfaces, they only bounce light where the light hits. They don't really bounce light everywhere. They don't bounce light equally. Light has to be able to get there. So for example, like on this shin pad, not really any light's going to get there. We're going to cheat because we want it to, you know, we kind of want it to stand out. But in reality, you know, there really wouldn't be a reason to highlight that because there wouldn't be any light there. But because we're doing miniatures and, you know, our goal is to make something that looks compelling and interesting to the tabletop, we're not always going to follow the direct rules of light and art and how and where light source would be. Because our light source, you know, we always assume, for most miniatures painting, you just assume it's noonday sun, right? So it's coming straight down or like straight on. But you cheat it because you also kind of assume as you move the miniature around, right, as you hold it in different directions and stuff, you do want to be able to really see some of those spots, some of those places better than others. And so areas that would normally just be completely in shadow from one direction won't be as you paint, because your goal is to make the entire miniature pleasing to the eye. So I'm just going to come in here, do this, do a little bit of a, now I'm just at pure silver here. So again, being very careful and considerate about where I'm putting this highlight. I don't want to lose any of my dark. I just, it's a little thick. My paint's drying out a little bit, but that's all right. I just want to get in those really bright spots of refracted light to make our armor seem like it's real shiny. And then the other trick that is something that you'll really pick up if you dive into non-metallic metals, but same when using true metallic metals, is place your brightest highlights next to your darkest shadows, right? Because again, the way in which metal refracts light, the way in which it bounces light, is that typically the spot where the brightest little refraction is surrounded by the darkest areas of the metal, because no light is able to get to those areas around it. And so that high contrast makes our eye think we're looking at, you know, some kind of metallic surface, some kind of area that's bouncing light. So, you know, you'll see like right here on this pad, we have this really dark, this is our base area, and we have a little bit of our brighter area, and then we have this bright spot. And I screwed up a little bit here, so I'm not super happy with how this color trailed down, because there's too much. Now there's too much bright, so it looks a little unnatural. So what I would want to do is to go back to my dark color, which has disappeared on me, because of course it has. There it is. But it's all dried up as well. So I'll go back to my initial really dark color. I might even mix a little black in with it, because I'm going to obviously be painting it over a brighter area. But we'll see how this works. So maybe grab a little bit of black, a little bit of that. Mix that together. Just get this really nice dark color back. And then it's going to come in here and, you know, work that area down a bit. And maybe work this over here. And by doing that, by coming in and building in those shadows, right? And this could be a whole step, because again, we didn't wash. We didn't do a really dark wash. So we can go in and start dark lining and getting all this stuff in and start working those contrasts. But hopefully you can see just from like this little bit, you know, the darker we get, the more reflective the surface starts to feel. And so you can really play with that if you want to. You can not worry about it if you don't want to. It's just another trick and tool to kind of help build stuff out. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking a little bit of a darker color. I'm just going in and building around it. I might even come in and like blend that out a bit. And so now I'm much more happier with this, because we've really tightened up that reflective surface. We've blended in our areas a bit better, and we've also added more shadow than we even started with now through this black dark silver mixture to really push that whole contrast. And that's, you know, that's going to be the approach at every stage. And you're going to push that until you're really happy with it. And then once you're really happy with it, you just move on. Just go to the next thing. This, and then I want to, yeah, we got a little bit of time left, so I'm going to shift gears, because I want to do Grogu's face, and just kind of talk about how I've approached his really super weird skin tone. I know Dallas has done a couple of videos in the past at Mini Strav and stuff. I think he did one on the Legion Din and Grogu, where he showed a really great tutorial on how to hit that realistic Grogu color. But as with many things, in order to get to that very specific kind of color, a very unique color that requires mixing colors you wouldn't normally think to mix for what, you know, you see in that skin tone. But get your pinks out if you really want to match Grogu's skin color identically, because there's a lot of pink undertone in his skin color, as we discovered from doing an extensive look at all of the reference photos and using Dallas's very keen art eye to kind of pick out how the blends and the mixes were working. But it does have a pink in it. I'm not going to use pink. I'm going to keep things pretty simple. I'm going to be using jade and turquoise and a little bright pale green to make overall a little facsimile of his actual skin tone. And I might even use a little bit of green as well, depending on how these colors kind of like play out. But really, the nice part about it is you only have to paint one Grogu, and his face is pretty dainty. So don't worry too much about, precise mixes or anything. Just find a feels right. Find something that feels good to you and that seems like it's matching his skin tone. And then by using these different colors, we shifted a little bit too much to the blue. So I'm going to grab, you know what? I'm just going to grab this really bright green, and we're going to be very careful with it. That'll be enough. I don't need a lot. This will take over your whole world right here. So there we go. So we just need a little bit of that normal green in there. Pull it back out. So now I know that, if I need to shade it, I'll use this. If I need to kind of like bring it to a neutral, I'll use this. This will kind of bring us down to shadow colors a little bit desaturated. I'm not going to worry too much about this color. But this one's how I'm going to highlight it. And that's going to keep things pretty simple. So we're just going to start with this as kind of our base. We do these little thingies. Boop, boop, boop. Boop, boop, boop. And Grogu is one of those ones where he's a really great test of how our brains aren't great at remembering how things actually are, but how they think they are. So, if you ask anybody what color Grogu is, they're going to tell you he's green. But the reality is there's very little green in Grogu's skin. He's really not green. He's more jade or turquoisey. So it's an element of green. There's definitely green there, but if I was like to hand you some colors and just be like, show me what Grogu's skin is like. 9 times out of 10, like we all did, even in the office as we were talking about it originally, from memory you'd say, oh, he's green, so just give me the green. Give me this color right here. This is Grogu's color. Look, right there. Yeah, that's Grogu, right? Grogu, he's green. He's not green. He's like this weird turquoisey color here, and then he's got these really pinky cheeks. Yeah, green, gray, pink, blue, it's not easy.
It is super wild, though, because looking at it in the well palette, it looks so like blue, but then when you put it on Grogu, I'm like, oh yeah, that is what he looks like.
Yeah, it's
kind of wild.
And so it's how those colors kind of interplay with the volumes and everything else, but also just how the character actually looks and what our memory is versus what the actuality is. And so this is why, we'll always say, what's the number one thing you should do if you want to really paint something to a specification? Like, you want to do your Mandalorian and you want to make him screen accurate. Make sure that you grab a bunch of reference, right? Find your couple of reference photos that you feel like really encapsulate, what you want the Mando to look like. And then use those. Always have those available in a place that you can see them really easily, right? So sometimes that means your phone, because if you paint looking down, then you can have your phone right there, turn off the auto screen, shut off little rest mode, turn that off, because you want to be able to just flick your eyes to it whenever you want, right? So one of the mistakes I made a lot was I would paint and I would have like my reference above me, right? So I would paint looking down because I'd be sitting or whatever, or kind of we naturally paint this way. And then I would have to look up. And once I broke my eyesight from what I was painting, it was a lot harder to go from the reference back to it. But if you can keep the reference in your eye line to where you don't have to lose sight of the miniature, but instead you can just quickly check the reference, it will make you much faster and much more confident. You won't do as much like back and forth, right? If you really have to look at something super closely, like you really got to get in there. There's a detail or there's a color or something. You're like, I just don't know what that is. I have to stare at this reference for a little bit. Obviously, that's you're gonna break your sight, line of sight. You're gonna kind of break your momentum. But for just I want to like be able to quickly check. Okay, what area is brown? What area is not brown? Is that leather? Is that steel? Is it something else? Is it cloth? Having that reference in your eye line, in your line of sight, to where you don't have to look away from the miniature, you don't have to necessarily stop what you're doing, can be a game changer. So definitely something to think about as you're like working through stuff. If you notice that, I always get reference, but then either checking it really breaks my mojo, it breaks my flow, and I don't like doing it, or I just never check it. I can never look at it because I'm so in the zone and it's so not in my mind's presence that I don't ever look anywhere. I don't do it. Those are ways to solve that problem. Like even right now, I'm wishing I had some reference up of little Grogu so I could tell you what the inner color of his ear is. I think it's pink, but I'm not entirely sure.
Like one?
No, it's fine. You can just tell me if they're pink or not.
I will look into it.
And maybe I'll do it, but we're kind of running out of time, so I probably won't do it. So, your efforts might be in vain. But again, it's kind of a good example.
They are pink on the inside.
Yeah, that's what I thought. They're like dog
Look
ears.
how cute he is.
He's so cute. He's got pink little cheeks.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness.
He's got the pinkest little cheeks. It's so lovely.
Ugh.
And his big old black, bright eyes. All good in there. Why not? A little bit of this. And then we grab some of this, and we grab some of this, mix it together. Because we don't want it to be pink. We need it to still be like the pink version of his skin. Something like that. And then we just go in and really quickly give him that little bit of ear color. And then if we want to, grab a bit more, and then very carefully give him a little pinky cheeks. Let's give him a little bit of that rosiness. Let's kind of blend that in. And there's that. All right, so we got a little bit left to do on our Mando. I just need to get these straps down here painted. I don't know what color they are, but I don't care. So we're just gonna do this. Just gonna go. This is probably way too bright, but it's fine. So we'll tone it down with that brown wash. He's got his weird little pouch down there on his leg wrappings. It's very strange. I never understood it. But man's got to have more pouches. He just needed more pouches. So he's like, put a pouch down here. In an emergency, I've got it. I know where it is. I can handle it. I can handle it. We'll grab a little bit of this. We'll just kind of like knock in that pouch. And once that's dry, you can hit it with a little, that'll work. Boop. Do a really quick and rough 2-brush blend here. And once this was dry, which will probably be after our stream ends, just go in there and hit it with a bit of brown wash. That contrast in and tone it down. That should replicate some nice little cloth wrappings pretty well. There's that. There's that. Yeah, so we just have the pram to go, really. Now maybe we can come in with our black wash. And just kind of get the cloak going. Let's just darken it up because we want to get, again, we want to get that contrast in there. We want to get those shadows in there. I like where our overall highlights are, but we can always use a bit more contrast in those shadows. So we'll just kind of use a little bit of a controlled wash. Let it run into those crevasses. And again, that'll just bring everything that next level of detail and life. We can even go in and do some dark lining over our leathers, deepen those up. And you might be like, well, black is too dark, you should use a brown wash. But if my goal here is to really just get all of those dark lines in, this is a very fast and effective way to do it, provided that you're careful, because black will take over your whole world. It will definitely, dull everything down, and you might have to go back in and potentially think about, brightening some things back up or picking back up highlights, but we haven't really done any highlighting on any of our browns yet. So we're just kind of using some multi-level washes here, some transparent filters between the initial coat we put on with the browns and now this transparent filter of the black to let a lot of this work come through. And I see that I forgot to do his little boot cover over here, but you know what? We'll just let the black wash work for that too, and then we can come back in and fix it up when we do highlights. Because I think that covering is black or brown, it doesn't really matter. But we can let our two-brush or our little zenith highlighting shading work for that. And then besides a little pram, we're pretty good to go. Can I find a brown wash really quick? Probably not. Dark bronze, that's not brown. That's not brown. The brown wash is hiding, Anne. It's hiding. There's a transparent brown. That kind of works. Not really. We'll use it. Why not? Transparent brown, not exactly the color I was looking for, but it'll be fine. Boop. Just make sure it mixes in, and then what we can do is just go in and that robe, that little cloth, or this little baby tunic, too bright. Now it's a little too dark, but we can fix that too with some easy highlighting as we get to it. But this will at least give us that contrast again. What?
Something about you calling it a baby tunic.
It's a baby tunic.
Really?
It's a little baby tunic. It's just a little cute little
baby tunic.
Just a cute little baby tunic. It's his little romper.
Oh my goodness.
It's his jams.
I love him so
But he gets
much.
to wear the jams wherever he wants. And we do the same thing over here if we want. Being careful of the fact that this paint is probably still wet, so we're probably going to get some blending we didn't want, but that's okay. We'll just play with it.
Does he only have the wraps on the one side?
He does. He's a very odd dresser because everything's pretty asymmetric on him. So yeah, it's a unique, one of the things is that this knee pad is very different between his two different costumes from early season 1 to season 2. A lot of little nuances that go on as he shifts his stuff, but his two little boot coverings are very different to show his ruffian ways, I guess. I don't really know. But it seems like it would be very annoying to have to put two different types of boot coverings on. I feel like you just want it to be one,
It seems like, to me, it always, when characters have that, it communicates that they're scavenging things.
Yeah, pulling things together.
Travels what they can get when they can get it.
It's whatever I can find, I'm going to take. But yeah, so he's got the wrappings on this leg, and then he's got the knee pad with the little knee rockets, and then on this side, he's got a hard leather boot covering that I think is black, but I'll have to check the reference for that. Anyway, that brings us to 2 o'clock. So in 1 hour, we've gotten this far. We got really close. We just have to finish the pram, finish the base, and then this Mandalorian and Grogu would be ready for the battlefield. No questions at all. And they'd look great. It'd be nice and poppy, and that little Grogu would look so cute on the tabletop, drawing all the eyes to him with his bright little green skin. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Of course, tune back in tomorrow, Wednesday, 1 p.m. Pacific. We're going to have a Dallas Kemp, our creative director, on. He's going to be doing something cool. I don't know what. I didn't look at the schedule that far ahead. And yes, I didn't look at tomorrow in the schedule. It sounds really lazy. You don't know what happens around here. There's a lot. There's a lot of things on the calendar.
I know what happens.
You do know it. Do you? Should we say?
We can say it.
I don't.
Yeah,
What is it?
I'm just checking, but.
Oh, see, you don't know what you're checking.
I did.
You're like, I know what's going on, and then I'm like, great, say it. And you're like, no, I got to check the calendar.
I can't say it.
Yeah, this is. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for defending me as you take pictures of whatever cool stuff you've got over there. Yeah.
It's Hera.
All right, so we're going to be painting Hera from the We Will Not Stand Down. That's the one I had to remember between the two. We Will Not Stand Down squad pack.
That's not what it's called.
It's not called. That's her identity, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
See. That's okay. What is it? Make the impossible possible.
Make the impossible possible.
Which one is it though? I think it's Make the Impossible Possible. Yeah. Anyway, so Hera's going to be on tomorrow. I'll be sure to tune in for that. Get to see how to paint some more cool green skin. And of course, we'll be back next Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific. Till next time, thanks for hanging out, chilling with me, talking, chatting, and doing some painting. I'm Will. You've been great. We'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.